The wind howled across the snow-choked canyon, slicing through Adeline Hartman's thin coat like icy knives, and she realized she had made a fatal mistake leaving the safety of the wagon trail. Her hands were numb, her boots clumping in the powdery drifts, and every flake that struck her face felt like a small betrayal. The world around her was a blur of white and shadow, and yet, somewhere ahead, she thought she saw movement, silent, deliberate. Something watched her, and for the first time in weeks, she felt more fear than loneliness. Adeline had come west seeking freedom, and a new beginning after losing everything in the city, a small inheritance gone to creditors, a house burned in a mysterious fire, and a heart too tired to love again. Her family was gone, her fortune vanished, and now she carried only a canvas satchel stuffed with a few changes of clothes, a journal, and the last letter she had ever received from a friend. Life in the unforgiving territory had been cruel, yet she still clung to hope. Even as the storm threatened to erase it, the canyon narrowed, cliffs rising like ancient sentinels, and she hugged herself tighter, wishing for a fire that didn't exist. Each breath came in shallow gasps, white clouds spiraling upward and disappearing instantly into the frozen sky. Then the sound reached her low, deliberate footsteps crunching in the snow. She spun, eyes wide, and caught sight of a figure, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in furs and weathered leather, the shadow of a long black braid trailing down his back. The Apache man's dark eyes met hers, and for a moment Adeline felt time pause. Fear rippled through her, sharp as the ice beneath her boots, yet something in his gaze held a strange calm. He did not raise a weapon. He did not speak. He simply observed, as though measuring her worth in silence. Then, slowly, he extended a hand. Not a hand of threat, but of choice and offer she could not yet understand. "Who? Who are you?" she stammered, voice cracking from the cold and the raw edge of panic. Her words seemed feeble against the roar of the storm. He made no answer at first, only motioned toward a shallow cave partially hidden behind jagged rocks. The wind tugged at her hair, whispered in her ears, and in the relentless white expanse, Adeline felt her reason waver. She wanted to flee, to escape into the snow, yet something stronger, something primal, anchored her feet. She followed him, step by trembling step, until the wind's howl was muffled and the shelter of the cave enclosed them in near darkness. The Apache lit a small fire with practiced hands, sparks dancing up the walls and illuminating the contours of his face. Strong, angular, yet undeniably gentle. The warmth was intoxicating after the frozen torment outside, and Adeline's stiff fingers began to thaw. I have nothing," she admitted, almost ashamed, glancing down at her soiled coat and worn boots. She expected him to turn away, to dismiss her like the world had so many times before, but he didn't. Instead, he moved closer, sitting across from her with the quiet certainty of someone who had seen suffering and chose to acknowledge it, not judge it. He offered her a small pouch of dried meat and water. "Eat," he said finally, his voice low and resonant, carrying the weight of mountains and the whisper of wind through canyons dot as she took it, her hands brushing his, a spark of warmth, not just from the fire coiled in her chest. For the first time in months, someone had given her more than survival. They had given her recognition. And in the firelight, she saw not just an Apache man, but a man whose life had also known hardship, whose eyes told stories she could not yet hear but longed to understand. The storm raged outside, unrelenting, but inside that cave, a fragile connection began to form, a tentative bridge across worlds. Across isolation, across the cold that had nearly claimed her. Adeline did not know his name, and he did not ask hers, yet both understood a deeper truth. Sometimes, survival meant more than shelter. It meant trust, even when the world had taken everything else. And so, Amidst the hiss of the fire and the moan of the wind outside, a story began, one of thawing hearts, quiet longing, and the dangerous, thrilling promise of love that neither had expected. This sets the stage. Adeline is lost and desperate. The Apache man is mysterious yet protective, and there is immediate emotional and romantic tension. The fire crackled, sending tiny sparks spiraling into the cave's dark corners. Adeline rubbed her hands together, trying to chase away the lingering frostbite. Takoda sat across from her, his posture relaxed but alert, eyes scanning the cave's mouth where the wind howled like a living thing. She noticed the way his muscles shifted beneath his tan skin as he adjusted his position, the play of shadows and firelight highlighting the strength in his arms and the tribal patterns etched into his jewelry. There was an undeniable presence about him, something magnetic, something that made her pulse quicken even as fear coiled in her stomach. You saved me," she said softly, her voice barely above the whisper of the wind outside. Her fingers traced the edge of the pouch he had given her, hesitant, unsure if she should ask anything more. Why? Why help a stranger? Takoda's eyes softened, and he tilted his head, regarding her with a patience that unsettled her. "Because you are alive," he said finally, his voice low, measured. "And because the storm does not care who suffers. It only takes. I cannot let it take you." The simplicity of his words struck her. No judgment, no questions about her past, no expectation, just recognition of her struggle. Adeline felt her chest tighten, emotion she hadn't allowed herself in months rising unbidden. She wanted to look away to shield herself, but something inside told her that looking away would be a mistake. You live here?" she asked, glancing around the cave. It was small, almost hidden, yet Takoda had made it a place of warmth and subtle comfort. Furs lined one corner, animal hides covering the rocky floor, and a small stack of firewood promised the cave could be home to more than just temporary refuge. "Yes," he replied simply, brushing a stray lock of hair from his face. "And you may, if you wish." The offer startled her. No one had ever welcomed her like that before. Everyone had always expected her to prove herself, to earn a place or to shrink and vanish. And yet here was a man, silent and strong, offering safety without question. She swallowed hard, feeling the chill from the storm slowly give way to a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. I don't even know your name," she admitted, a small, hesitant smile tugging at her lips. "Takoda," he said. "It means he who seeks the counsel. And you?" "Adeline," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost vulnerable, and for a moment she caught a glimmer of something in his gaze that was not only acknowledgment, but interest. The cave grew quieter, the storm outside a distant roar now muffled by the stone walls. Adeline finally allowed herself to breathe, her body relaxing as she settled near the fire. Takoda had moved a small pile of furs closer to her, and she felt a thrill she couldn't name, a mixture of gratitude, relief, and something else. Something that made her heartbeat quicken. "You are different from others," Takoda said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Many who wander this land are desperate, angry, afraid. You are fragile, yes, but not broken. You carry your past, yet it does not own you." Adeline's throat tightened. No one had ever seen her like that, not her losses, not her fears. She felt an unsteady warmth rising in her chest, one she hadn't expected so soon. Her hand brushed against the furs and her gaze flicked to him. "And you?" she asked quietly. "You carry no pain?" Takoda's lips curved, just slightly, into a shadow of a smile. "Pain is part of life. But I choose what I let define me." His eyes held hers steadily, a silent challenge and an unspoken invitation. For the first time in months, Adeline allowed herself to imagine something beyond mere survival. She could picture mornings waking to the light streaming into the cave, the smell of pine and wood smoke, Takoda's steady presence beside her. The thought was dangerous, thrilling, and completely irresistible. The firelight flickered, shadows dancing across Takoda's features, and she found herself drawn to him, to the strength, to the calm, to the unspoken promise in his gaze. A warmth bloomed in her chest, one that had nothing to do with the fire, and she realized with a start that the storm outside no longer terrified her as much. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered that this connection, this strange, wild, unexpected closeness was the first step towards something neither of them could have anticipated, and in the heart of the canyon, with the wind howling outside and the fire between them, a fragile trust began to take root, a trust that would grow into something far more dangerous and far more beautiful than either Adeline or Takoda could yet imagine. The next morning, Adeline awoke to a dim glow seeping through the cave's entrance, the wind outside calmer but still biting. Takoda was already awake, kneeling beside the fire, adding kindling with deliberate, practiced movements. His bare chest gleamed with frost-touched warmth from the embers, and Adeline couldn't help but notice how the morning light caught the contours of his muscles, shadows tracing the sharp lines of his arms and shoulders. Despite her fascination, she reminded herself to focus on survival. Admiration could wait. "Breakfast," he said simply, handing her a small portion of dried meat and water. His eyes met hers, steady and intense, as if measuring not just her hunger, but her spirit. She accepted it silently, feeling a curious mixture of gratitude and nervous tension. Each shared glance seemed loaded with unspoken words, the cave heavy with a quiet intimacy she had never expected to encounter in the wilderness. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the canyon glazed in frost, icicles dangling from jagged cliffs like crystalline daggers. Takoda rose, stretching, his movements fluid and effortless, and then motioned for her to follow. Adeline's boots crunched over the snow, the sound startlingly loud in the still, frozen world. The Apache led her to a narrow path along the cliffside, and as they walked, the canyon unfolded like a frozen cathedral towering rocks, a winding river shimmering beneath a thin sheet of ice, and the faint call of distant hawks. "You are strong," he said without turning, his voice carrying over the cold air. "But you carry more than your body can show. Fear, loss. You try to hide it, yet it lingers." Adeline hesitated, her gaze fixed on the icy river below. "I've had to be strong," she admitted softly. "Life, it doesn't forgive mistakes. I've lost everything, Takoda. My home, my family. I came here thinking I could start over, but the land itself seems determined to test me." He nodded, finally meeting her gaze, eyes dark and deep. "The land does test, yes. But it also teaches. You have endured, and that is why you are here, why you live." There was a reverence in his tone that made her chest tighten. He wasn't just observing her. He was seeing her, truly seeing her in a way that no one else ever had. They reached a small ledge overlooking the canyon floor. The view was breathtaking, snow glinting like 1,000 diamonds under the pale morning sun, the river winding like a silver ribbon far below. Takoda knelt, brushing snow from a patch of exposed rock, revealing a shallow depression. From a small pouch he drew seeds, ancient and smooth, and began planting them in neat rows. "Why? Why show me this?" Adeline asked, curiosity mingling with awe. "Because life is not only survival," he replied, placing the final seed. "It is creation. We plant, we nurture, we endure. This is how we claim our place, how we honor what has been lost and what may yet grow." His hands, strong and precise, were so unlike anything she had seen in her city life, deliberate, patient, skilled. Watching him, she felt a stirring inside her. a desire to be part of something enduring, to belong. She knelt beside him, hesitating, then placed her own hands in the soil. Takoda's eyes softened at the gesture. "Good," he said simply, the single word feeling like both instruction and praise. They worked side by side, the cold fading under the warmth of the sun and the quiet intimacy between them. Hours passed, and as they finished, Adeline realized that she hadn't felt fear or loneliness in that time. The world had narrowed to this man, this shared purpose, and the subtle brush of his hands near hers as they planted the seeds. She felt herself leaning toward him, drawn by more than gratitude, drawn by the raw, unspoken promise of connection. Takoda stood finally, brushing snow from his legs, and extended his hand to her. "Come," he said, his voice low, intimate. "There is more you must see." She took it without hesitation, the warmth of his hand searing through her gloves, through her doubts, through the cold she had carried in her chest for months. And as they moved together along the cliffside, she realized that her journey westward had not been just for survival, but for this strange, dangerous, thrilling discovery of trust, of warmth, and of the stirring pull of a heart daring to beat for another. And somewhere in the frozen expanse of the canyon, with snow sparkling like crushed diamonds and the wind whispering secrets through the cliffs, Adeline Hartman allowed herself for the first time to imagine a life not dictated by loss, but by connection, by possibility, and by Takoda. The afternoon sun dipped lower, painting the canyon in shades of amber and gold. Adeline and Takoda had returned from the ledge where they planted the seeds. Their fingers brushed more than once, lingering moments that neither acknowledged aloud. The cave awaited them, a modest refuge from the biting cold that still lingered in shaded corners. Inside, the warmth of the fire and the scent of pine from the small bundle of kindling made the space feel almost sacred. A hidden sanctuary carved out of the harsh wilderness. Takoda leaned against the cave wall, eyes narrowing as he watched the distant horizon. "Storms come faster in the mountains," he said quietly. "Sometimes without warning. We must be prepared." Adeline's gaze followed his, tracing the jagged ridges and frozen slopes, then returned to his face. She noted the way his dark eyes softened when he looked at her, the faint curve of his lips suggesting humor or perhaps reassurance. She realized she had begun to rely on his presence in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her pulse quickened with every glance, every small movement. Yet she kept herself rooted in practicality. "I think I can manage," she replied with a faint smile, lifting a fur blanket and shaking out its wrinkles. "I may not know much about surviving in this wilderness, but I'm learning. You're a good teacher." Takoda's gaze held hers longer than necessary, a weight of meaning in the silence between words. "You are resilient," he said finally, his voice low, almost intimate. "Resilience is a gift and also a burden. You carry it well." The compliment, simple though it was, made her chest tighten. She felt a flutter of warmth she could not name, a dangerous spark that had been growing since the day he had first offered her shelter. She looked away quickly, focusing on laying the blankets near the fire, trying to disguise her racing thoughts. Outside, the wind whispered through the canyon, stirring loose snow into gentle swirls. Takoda's movements were deliberate as he prepared a small space near the fire for her to rest. He brought over a cup of warm broth, steam curling into the air, carrying the rich aroma of herbs he had gathered from the canyon floor. "Drink," he urged, holding it steady for her hands. She accepted it, the heat seeping into her fingers and then her chest, easing the chill that still clung to her bones. "Thank you," she murmured, their fingers brushing again in a fleeting contact that sent a shiver down her spine. "You do not need to thank me," he said, a shadow of a smile on his lips. "You are here because you survived, because you allowed trust to reach you." Adeline's gaze dropped to the fire. the flames dancing over the rugged planes of his face, and she noticed a quiet intensity that seemed to penetrate every barrier she had built around herself. "I've never felt like this," she admitted, voice barely above the fire's crackle. "Not safe. Not seen. Not wanted." Takoda's expression softened, and he moved slightly closer, the firelight glinting off his tribal jewelry. "You are wanted, Adeline. By me, at least. And perhaps, in ways you have not yet learned to recognize, by the land itself. It has carried you to me, and in that, there is purpose." The warmth of his words, coupled with the closeness of his presence, made her heart thrum in her chest. She could feel the subtle power of his gaze, the unspoken promise it carried, and it drew her toward him despite the rational mind screaming caution as twilight settled in, painting the cave walls in deep amber and shadow. Takoda extended his hand once more, not with instruction, but as an offer, a gesture of shared understanding. Adeline hesitated, then took it, the heat of his hand igniting a spark that coursed through her body. She realized she no longer feared the isolation or the cold. She feared only losing this fragile connection they had forged in the wilderness. A moment of quiet passed, the wind outside singing its lonely song through the canyon. Then Takoda leaned closer, the scent of pine and smoke enveloping her, his voice low, intimate, resonating with emotion. "There is more to this world than survival, Adeline. There is love, trust, and the courage to let another into your life. Will you let me in?" Her breath caught, heart hammering in her chest, yet she did not pull away. Instead, she allowed herself to meet his gaze fully, to acknowledge the feelings that had been stirring from their first shared fire. "Yes," she whispered, barely audible, yet carrying a conviction she had not known she possessed. The fire crackled between them, the shadows playing across their faces as the canyon outside darkened. In that small cave, surrounded by the unforgiving wilderness, Adeline Hartman realized that she had begun to thaw, not from the fire, not from survival, but from the warmth of Takoda's presence, and from the first daring steps of a love that neither had expected, but both had silently longed for. The night stretched on, filled with unspoken words and the quiet, thrilling awareness that their connection had shifted into something deeper, something dangerously beautiful, something that neither the frozen wilderness nor past hardships could extinguish. The next morning, the canyon was painted in shades of silver and gold, the frost catching the first light of dawn like 1,000 tiny stars. Adeline shivered as she stepped outside the cave, the crisp air biting at her cheeks. But Takoda was already there, bare-chested and muscular, his long black hair tousled by the wind. He looked at her with that same steady, intense gaze, and she felt warmth rise in her chest despite the cold. "You should rest," he said quietly, moving closer. His presence was commanding yet gentle, like the land itself, and she found herself reluctant to protest. "There is more to show you." Adeline hesitated, but curiosity outweighed caution. Together, they descended a narrow path that led to a hidden valley, a place untouched by the storm. The snow here was softer, dusted like powdered sugar over pine trees and jagged rocks. A small creek meandered through the valley, the water clear and singing over smooth stones. The sight stole her breath. She had never known beauty so fierce and raw. Takoda knelt by the water, cupping his hands and letting the liquid trickle through his fingers. "This valley is hidden," he said, eyes never leaving hers. "Few find it, and fewer still are welcome here. But you?" His gaze softened, almost unbearably so. "You are welcome." Adeline felt a rush of emotion she could not name. She had survived loss, fire, betrayal, loneliness, yet standing here, beside Takoda in this secret haven, she felt the possibility of hope. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice trembling. I've never seen anything like it." Takoda rose, his movements fluid, and extended his hand to her. She took it, feeling the warmth of his skin against the cold. "The land has lessons," he said. "It shows who can endure, who can trust, and who can love despite fear." They walked together along the creek, the snow crunching beneath their boots until they came to a small cluster of evergreen trees. Takoda knelt and began clearing a space, motioning for her to sit beside him. "I will teach you how to prepare for winter properly," he said, his voice low and confident. "There is skill in survival, but there is also skill in patience, in observation, in respect for what the land gives." Adeline watched him carefully, feeling her heart beat faster as she noticed the subtle flex of his biceps, the way his muscles shifted with every movement, the focus in his dark eyes. "I want to learn," she admitted, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. "I want to survive, and I want to understand you. Everything you know, everything you are, I want to see it." Takoda studied her, a flicker of a smile on his lips. "And you shall," he said. "But learning is not only about technique. It is also about trust." His hand hovered near hers, just close enough to brush against her fingers. Her pulse raced, and she could not deny the magnetic pull she felt toward him. There was safety in his strength, yet danger in the emotions he stirred, a thrilling, terrifying danger she had almost forgotten existed. She allowed her hand to touch his, feeling the heat, the assurance, and the unspoken promise that he would never harm her. For hours, they worked side by side, gathering firewood, clearing space, and setting simple traps for game. Each touch, each shared glance, each quiet word layered their connection, building a tension that neither could ignore. When the sun dipped low, casting the valley in molten gold and amber, they sat together on a fallen log, breath steaming in the chill. Takoda looked at her then, eyes dark, intense, and unwavering. "Adeline, you are no longer just a wanderer," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You are part of this land, part of my life, part of me." Her heart surged, and she leaned slightly closer, drawn to him despite the cautious part of her mind. I feel the same," she admitted, the words trembling but true. "I've been afraid to trust, afraid to care, but I care. For you. For this, for us." The canyon fell silent, the only sounds the distant rush of the creek and the soft sighing of the wind through the evergreens. For the first time, Adeline let herself imagine a future beyond survival, a future where warmth, love, and trust could exist alongside the harsh beauty of the wilderness. Takoda reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, his touch lingering. "Then let us face it together," he said, his voice firm, promising. "Whatever comes storm, winter, shadow, we will face it as one." And in that frozen, hidden valley, Adeline Hartman realized that her heart, once guarded and wary, had begun to thaw completely. The world outside could be cruel, the land unforgiving, yet with Takoda beside her, she had discovered a love as wild, raw, and unyielding as the canyon itself. The morning air was crisp, the kind that stung exposed skin and made every breath a visible plume of white. Adeline tightened her coat, though Takoda barely felt the cold, standing bare-chested as if the wind itself could not touch him. She admired his strength, the way his muscles flexed with ease as he moved along the canyon edge, gathering branches for the fire. Yet admiration alone didn't prepare her for what he had planned next, a journey deeper into the heart of the canyon, where survival and danger intertwined. "You must be careful," Takoda warned, his dark eyes scanning the snow-laden cliffs. "The storm may have passed, but the canyon can shift. Ice, hidden crevices. One misstep can be fatal." Adeline nodded, gripping the satchel she carried, but inside, excitement fluttered against the caution. She had followed Takoda this far, trusted him in ways she never expected. And every step deeper into the wilderness strengthened the connection that had begun by the fire, by the creek in that hidden valley. They descended a narrow ravine, the snow crunching beneath their boots, and came upon a frozen waterfall. Its surface glinted like fractured crystal in the early sunlight, and the air held a stillness that seemed almost sacred. Takoda knelt at its base, inspecting the ice and testing its stability. "We will climb," he said, eyes catching hers with a spark of mischief and challenge. "Trust yourself in me." Adeline's heart skipped a beat. The idea terrified her, but the thought of refusing him, of holding back, was impossible. She nodded, and with Takoda leading, they began their careful ascent. He moved with effortless precision, every step calculated, his hands steady as they guided hers. Despite the icy surface, the danger, the frozen waterfall threatening to crack beneath them, she felt a thrill unlike anything before a dangerous intimacy. The electricity of reliance, of being physically and emotionally intertwined. Halfway up, a sudden crack echoed through the canyon. Adeline froze, the ice beneath her shifting slightly. Takoda's hand shot out, gripping hers with a strength that both startled and reassured her. "I've got you," he said, voice low, steady, vibrating with quiet authority. The warmth of his hand spread through her chest, thawing more than the chill from the air. When they reached a small plateau above the waterfall, the view stole her breath. The canyon stretched endlessly, snow-dusted cliffs glowing gold in the rising sun, the river below winding like a silver ribbon through the wilderness. Takoda stood close behind her, bare chest glistening in the cold, and she felt the heat radiating from him as their shoulders brushed. "You see it," he murmured, voice almost reverent. "The land? It is harsh, unforgiving, yet breathtaking. And it is ours to witness if we have courage." Adeline turned slightly, looking into his dark, unwavering eyes. "It's more than I imagined," she whispered. "And I feel alive here with you, like I've never felt before." Takoda's expression softened, a rare tenderness breaking through the stoic strength he carried. He reached for her, brushing a strand of hair from her face, the touch lingering, deliberate. "Then you are learning the truth," he said quietly. "Life is not only survival. It is trust, connection, love." Her pulse raced, and in that instant, Adeline felt the full weight of her emotions: fear, longing, exhilaration, and a fragile hope she had tried to suppress. She leaned slightly into him, the heat from his body contrasting with the icy wind, their breaths mingling in the cold air. For a moment neither spoke. The wind whispered through the canyon, the sun glittered off ice and snow, and the frozen waterfall shone like diamonds. Then Takoda's hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally, and she realized she did not want to pull away. "Adeline," he said, voice low, intimate, a promise threading through every syllable. "Whatever comes, storm, shadow, hardship, you will not face it alone." She swallowed hard, heart hammering. "And you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Will you be here, always?" He met her gaze steadily. "As long as I draw breath," he said, dark eyes burning with sincerity. "No force of nature, no danger, will take me from you." A shiver ran through her, not from the cold, but from the raw, unspoken truth in his words. And standing there, atop the frozen waterfall, with the wilderness stretching endlessly around them, Adeline Hartman finally let herself imagine a life beyond loss, a life with Takoda, bound not by fear but by trust, passion, and the quiet, undeniable pull of love that had grown stronger with every shared fire, every brush of hands, every whispered word in the frozen canyon. And as the wind danced around them, carrying snow and sunlight together, Adeline felt her heart fully open for the first time in years, ready to face whatever the wild, unpredictable world would throw at them. Together. The first light of dawn broke over the canyon, spilling golden rays across the snow-dusted cliffs. Adeline awoke to the soft crackle of the fire Takoda had kept burning through the night. He sat nearby, eyes half closed but alert, his bare chest gleaming in the warm glow. She felt a sudden surge of gratitude and something deeper, an overwhelming certainty that she belonged here, with him, in this wild and untamed land. "Good morning," he said softly, his voice carrying the same quiet authority that had captivated her from the moment they met. "Good morning," she replied, voice still husky from sleep. She rose slowly, brushing snow from her coat, feeling the ache of muscle stiff from their previous day's journey. Despite the chill, the warmth radiating from him made the cave feel like the safest place on earth. Takoda stood, his movements fluid, every muscle coiling and stretching in a display of controlled power. He extended his hand. "Today, we leave the canyon," he said. "There is more to see, more to live. But we must move carefully. The winter is harsh, and the land will test us until the thaw." Adeline took his hand, feeling the steady heat of his grip. The touch sent a shiver through her, not from cold, but from the intimacy that had built between them. She smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile. "Then we face it together," she said. They began the trek down the canyon trail, Takoda guiding her with ease, pointing out safe paths and hidden dangers. The snow crunched beneath their boots, the river glinting like molten silver in the distance. Every step was deliberate, yet their hands found each other repeatedly, instinctively, a silent acknowledgement of trust and the bond that had formed over days of hardship and shared survival. At midday, they reached a plateau overlooking a vast frozen valley. The view took her breath away, endless white stretches broken by jagged cliffs, pines heavy with snow, and the river curling through the valley like a ribbon of glass. Takoda knelt, patting the snow. "This valley has been my refuge," he said, his voice low and reverent. "Few have seen it, fewer still have been welcome, but you belong here." Adeline's chest tightened. Words had failed her for weeks, but now she felt compelled to speak, to share the truth that had grown in her heart. "Takoda, her voice broke, but she pressed on. "I've never felt safe, never felt seen. Until you, I love you." For a heartbeat, he said nothing. The wind stirred, carrying snowflakes around them, the valley silent except for the distant call of a hawk. Then Takoda rose, his dark eyes fixed on hers, burning with a fierce, unwavering intensity. "Adeline," he said, his voice both gentle and commanding, "you are more than my guest, more than my companion. You are my heart, and I love you. Always have, always will." The words settled between them, heavy with truth, and Adeline felt her chest swell with relief and joy. She stepped closer, reaching for him, and he met her halfway. Their lips met in a tender, searing kiss, a promise forged in snow, fire, and shared struggle. The world around them seemed to pause, the canyon, the cliffs, the frozen river, all witnesses to the union of two souls who had found warmth and love in the most unforgiving of lands. Hours passed in quiet bliss. They walked hand in hand through the valley, discovering hidden nooks where the snow glowed like diamonds. And Takoda taught her how to read the land, how to survive and thrive within it. Yet the lesson was more than survival. It was about connection, about partnership, about the courage to love despite scars, despite fear. As evening fell, painting the valley in crimson and gold, they returned to their cave. Takoda had prepared a small space near the fire, blankets layered and furs arranged, the scent of pine and smoke comforting and familiar. Adeline rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling the rhythm of life, love, and hope that now bound them together. "I never imagined this," she murmured, voice soft. "I never imagined finding this." "Neither did I," Takoda admitted, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "But the land, the storms, the snow, they brought you to me, and I will not let you go." The night deepened, snow swirling gently outside, but inside the cave held warmth, safety, and love. Adeline closed her eyes, feeling Takoda's strong arms around her, knowing that the frozen wilderness no longer represented fear, loneliness, or survival alone. It represented life, connection, and a love as wild and enduring as the canyon itself. And in that quiet, snowy sanctuary, Adeline Hartman understood fully that she had found home not in walls or wealth, not in the city she had left behind, but in the heart of Takoda, the strength of the land, and the bond they had forged against all odds. Together they would face storms, winters, and shadows, but they would face them as one unbroken, unyielding, and in love. The fire crackled, the snow sparkled outside, and the first stars appeared above the canyon. For Adeline and Takoda, the wilderness had become a place of warmth, hope, and the enduring promise of a love that neither frost nor fate could ever freeze.